Hello, in this video I'm going to give you an example of the sceneservice ScriptQuery interface. So I have some code over here. Let me first go to the wiki. So when I go to the wiki, when you go to, well, it says .sdk.loxology.com, but it's an old page, so now it's thefoundry.com. When you go to reference ScriptQuery overview, then on that page you have an overview. It's very important that you know about this. It starts with command service, which is a ScriptQuery interface like sceneservice and layer-service. And when you scroll to the bottom of that page, so I'm ScriptQuery overview, scroll to the bottom of that page, you have the ScriptQuery reference. When you go over there, you have command service reference, host service, layer service, message service, platform service, and ScriptQuery Interface 701 updates. And this is the one I am interested in because I'm going to look up sceneservice. So when you open that, let's see over here, ScriptQuery Interface 701 updates. I hope this is still up to date. And number 3 is sceneservice. So when I click that, you have your sceneservice query attributes that you can use. So I'm going to give an example of that. So I'm going back to Modo. And over here I have some code commented out. And this is actually code based on a video by Keith. And let me show you what I mean. So when you go to YouTube, and yes, it's really Keith. He has a YouTube channel. He has recently uploaded several scripting tutorials. When you check out his playlists, like over here. But he also has some older tutorials, and I'm going to scroll down a bit, and I have to load some more. Python and modeling a starting point. So the code I am going to discuss is based on what Keith shows in this video. So I don't take credit for the code. I just wanted to clarify a few things for my own sake and share you this video that I'm making about it. So let me first show you what I have done and then explain what Keith has done in his video, because first I want to discuss the sceneservice itself. It's not about the code as such, it's actually about sceneservice, the video that I'm making right now, and then later on I will discuss why I made a different script than what Keith has shown in his video. So when I press Ctrl W, I have my default scene, meaning in the item list I have mesh, which contains no geometry, camera, and directional light. When I run my script now and link it to the event log, mesh has not been found. So what does that mean? Well, I have a function that I've named mf_search mesh item by name and return its ID, and it takes an argument var past name, so it's a very long name, but I do this so that it's clear what the function does. And when I call that function, I pass it a string mesh name. So it's going to look if there is a mesh item called mesh name. And that can be done with the sceneservice ScriptQuery interface. So let me go through the code. First I'm setting two boolean flags and I set them to false. So a var flag type mesh equals false and a var flag name found equals false. I'm going to use these flags later to test whether I've found a type mesh and whether I've found a type mesh with a name that I passed in the function. And then I have my first query sceneservice. So I'm declaring a variable, and this will be an integer. being returned by alex.eval, and then query sceneservice item.end question mark. This code executed by alex.eval will return the number of items that I have in my scene. And then I'm going to loop from 0 to that number, and I'm going to look for the item type. So I'm declaring a variable var item type, and that equals alex.eval, and I'm querying, so query sceneservice item.type label, because I want to know the label of the item being queried, question mark, and then %s within the quotes. Since I am in a for loop, I need my index to be dynamic. So I'm passing it % for each item. Now, why the index, or why do I need to specify for each item? Well, item.type label needs a special selector in order for the scene service to know what to operate on. So this is not the same as selecting something in the item list. This is something else, but ScriptQuery interfaces, they sometimes require special selectors so that internally Modo knows what object it's dealing with. And in the case of item.type label, you can pass an index. And since I am in the for loop, I am doing it with the %s like I explained, so that the index is dynamic in the for loop. Then, continuing, if that type that has been returned does not equal mesh, then I'm not interested, so I'm going to continue in my for loop. If it does continue mesh, then I have my else, and then I'm setting my var flag type mesh to true, meaning now I have found an item of type mesh. And then I'm declaring a var item name, and again a query done with alex.eval. So in this time the query is query sceneservice item.name question mark. So I'm querying the name, and again %s, because it needs to be dynamic, and then % for each item. And then I test if var item name not equals var past name. So if it's not the name that I'm looking for, then continue. And else, then I set my flag to name found is true. So var flag name found is true. And then I'm going also to query the item ID. So a variable var item ID, again alex.eval, and then the query sceneservice item ID question mark. And again, item ID also needs a special selector. So again, the %s, which is then again the index. And because it needs to be dynamic, %s and % for each item. And that's the end of the for loop. So then I'm checking if my flags have been set. So if not var flag type mesh, so if my var flag type mesh still is false, then I have not encountered mesh items, so I return the string there are no mesh items in this scene. Else if I have set my flag to type mesh, that means there are mesh items, then I check if my var flag name found is true, and in that case I can return the var ID that I've queried with sceneservice item ID question mark %s. And else, meaning there is an item of type mesh, but my flag is still false, return mesh has not been found. So as you can see, there is a mesh item, and in the event log it says mesh has not been found. So let me show you what happens if I don't have a mesh. I'm going to delete that and run the code. And now it says to the event log, mesh has not been found. And let me add several mesh items, and for instance call this one mesh name. And now run the code. Oh, and I have in the Python editor a selection, so when I click this button to execute, it will only execute the selected part, so I have to deselect that and press this icon, and I get the ID of that mesh item. So this was a bit of a starting point with regard to the sceneservice ScriptQuery interface. So as discussed before, it's very important if you do use the old command system to know about these and to know how to use all these. I plan to do more tutorials on them because it's not always as easy as the example that I've given in this script. You will, when you deal with this kind of interfaces, encounter many problems, and it will take a while before you get comfortable in it. There is a lot that I need to learn about it. But as I said, the script that I've created here is based on a script that Keith had made in his video, and now I'm going to show you why I chose his example. And let me first uncomment his script. So select everything, control slash to uncomment everything, and I'm going to also click in the viewport, control W to clear my scene, and don't save. I'm going to clear the log and the output window. So now I'm back to my default window, default scene, I mean. And so again, a definition for a function and a call to that function, and it's passing mesh name. So let me first call this item mesh name. Yep, and run the code, and it indeed returns the ID. The problem actually with this code is, and I'm going to again go to a default scene, so don't save, and add a mesh to that scene. So I'm not renaming the original mesh item. Well, I can rename it. Let me rename it original one. That's the original one. And this is mesh name. So when I now run this code, I get an error. So in this code, he does a system exit if the item name is not equal to the past name. So meaning when you search for mesh name and it's not equal, well, sorry, I'm being a bit confusing here. Let me briefly go over the code. So it's actually very similar to what I've shown before. So all items is the query sceneservice item.n. So again, the loop for all items. Item type is the query sceneservice item.type label. And then he says is if item type is mesh, then he search for the name. And if item name equals the name that has been passed, then he search for the ID, and else break. Now you see in the item list I have changed the second item to actually mesh name. So it's grayed out right now. I don't know. Yes, if I click it, it will be more clearly. So there is an item named mesh name, but what happens? Well, the original one has a lower index than the new one. And as soon as it encounters this code, if item type equals mesh, yes, original one is of type mesh. And when he investigates whether it equals the name that I passed in the function, it will be false, and then it goes to the else and so to system exit. So that's the problem that I encountered when I followed his video tutorial. What he does is actually Control C, and I'm going to delete that item. He renamed the original one, so we only had one mesh item, and then of course the code works like you see in event log now, mesh 002. But if you add mesh items and you rename one of the others, then the original one will have a lower index, and with this code, the first time in the loop that it encounters a mesh, it will not be equal to the name you're looking for, so the else will be executed, and so system exit will be executed. So that is what I wanted to show you, that it's always very important to test out different scenarios like I did. Instead of just renaming the original mesh, I added mesh items and called one of the others mesh name to see if the code also worked. So mesh name, and now this will be mesh name 2, of course. So let me delete the original one, and maybe when deleting the original one it actually might work. So let me clear the log. No, again you see there is a mesh name, but this code doesn't work because probably there is a mesh item with a lower index than that one, and the code, when it encounters, yes, it's of type mesh, but it's not equal to the name I'm looking for, so the else will be executed and we will get the system exit. So very important how to construct everything. I plan to do more tutorials about it. I'm very thankful to Keith anyway, although this code wasn't maybe his best example. I already have learned a lot by looking at his tutorials, so this is not to criticize him, but it is something that I wanted to point out, and every extra help is welcome, I think. So this was it. Bye for now.